There are three kind of use cases in GCCs. There is the new setup GCC, right? 0 to 500,000, whatever it is. There is the scaling GCC, which is the one I had done at VMware. So I had done the eBay one, which was, roughly 100. When I joined them, they were in Chennai. I moved, reset it up in Bangalore, grew it from to about 500 people. That was one journey. I had done that. I had done the 2,500 to 10,000 journey. But at FIS, it was double that size. Built for a different, older model of a delivery center, very much cost focused. And then now this was transforming a GCC, which was at scale. How do you move a GCC at that scale from one model to another model? So it gave me a third use case to work on, right? So being a product guy, you hand a product guy a GCC, it becomes a product. So that's why I look at it. One of those times when people talk about GCCs as an infinite growth, I had the both the good fortune of setting it up and the ill fortune of shutting it down. The scale at which we operate, and there is, as people say, there is scale and there's India scale. And if you can operate India scale on a global level, I think there's some really good learnings that we can bring to the table.
Welcome to GCC Unplugged, where real leaders share raw insights. I am Saurabh Kumar, the host for this podcast, and I have with me today Ram Kumar Narayanan, EVP and Head India and Philippines FIS. Ram has led large-scale engineering and product teams that build fintech platforms capabilities from India for FIS global customers. Today, we'll walk through his career, how FIS built out capabilities here, and what India's GCC ecosystem needs to remain a product and innovation hub. Thank you, Ram, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Ram, tell me something. A mechanical engineer who started developing virtual prototyping software for the automotive industry. How did that happen?
Yeah, at the time when I graduated from college many years ago, computer science had just come in. Right? It was a very small group. Nobody really knew what it was. And I right from childhood, I liked making things.
Okay.
I used to do a lot of Lego and, building models and stuff like that. So I always had interest in machines. And that's what I became a mechanical engineer. My undergraduate was in mechanical. Then I went to the US, did my master's in mechanical engineering. But by then, computers had slowly started, getting more mainstream even in the other engineering disciplines. Okay. So my master's work was in computer-aided engineering, and that's what led me into my first phase of my career. I spent 12 years in the auto industry in Detroit, designing car suspensions and writing simulation software for simulating car suspensions before they designed. So this was the late 80s. Let me just frame the time frame, right? Yeah. Late 80s through the whole of 90s. The auto industry in the US, as you can imagine, was going through a lot of struggles. The Japanese were coming in with their cars that were really popular. So the American auto industry was trying to get efficient, and one way they thought efficiency would come is digital transformation.
Right.
So they wanted to move away from building cars the traditional way to simulating them on the computer and be able to then rapidly convert that into production ready vehicles. So the cycle time of a new car in the US used to be somewhere between 6 to 7 years. The Japanese were best in class. Toyota and Honda were at 4 years. So the only way they could compete was by rapidly, shrinking the product development cycle. So that was a very interesting time to be in the auto industry. And so that led me into that part of my career. And I've always been in software. So I used to write software. I was a software developer for 12 years, but in a different discipline, not in how you would think about like a Microsoft or something. But so that was a very interesting phase. I actually, I completely built up a team and a set of software at Ford, where I used to work, on completely simulating a vehicle on the suspension side, because there are other teams working on other parts of the car, but the ability to actually design a suspension from existing components. So one of the things was, how do you reuse? And we built the entire simulation software that actually allowed you to do that. So very interesting. In fact, my team there won an award, the Chairman's Award at Ford, which was the first software team ever to win that award in the mid-90s. But somewhere along the way, I said, look, this is great. And I had my own company. I was doing some, consulting work and all that. And I did my MBA. So, it was one of those things you do. And that led me, my next 25 years, a very different set of journey from where I started off in the auto industry.
You wanted to put it in a frame of time. Which was the latest car of Ford at that point in time? Let's understand.
The Ford Taurus had been redone. The Ford Explorer, the Expedition. I mean, the big SUVs were starting to come out.
Right.
But they were very profitable vehicles for them. The big SUVs, because they were built on the truck platform.
Oh,
The
so
pickup
they
truck
used
platforms.
the same platform, yeah.
Yeah, they were reusing those platforms. And those were already, amortized to a large extent, right? So when you built these large SUVs, and they were getting more and more popular. So the large SUVs were starting to take hold. Ford had gone through a complete product refresh on their sedans as well. So there's a lot of, energy in those kinds of areas. I actually started off in Chrysler.
Okay.
Where I, was part of the same, internal consulting team working on engineering problems. And then I moved to Ford. So I'd seen kind of the life cycle. Chrysler, had died many times and resurrected itself,
It's been the phoenix of the industry.
So the phoenix of the industry, and it's still there, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it still survived.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting times to be there. It was very, difficult times, but it was very interesting to see the journey. That is what actually led me to my MBA, because one of the things along the way that I realized I really liked doing, writing software was fun, but I actually started understanding the customer intent, and I started enjoying that a lot more than just writing the software. Understanding customers, understanding their psyche, their mindset, their requirements, what they were not telling me when they were giving me requirements, right? Which I later realized is called product management in the industry.
Okay.
I didn't know what product management was, but I started enjoying that. And that's what led me to my MBA. So I lived in a town called Ann Arbor in Michigan.
Okay.
And it's also the home of the University of Michigan.
Yeah, I know.
Right? So I have a master's in engineering and an MBA from
Ross, I guess.
From Ross,
Yeah.
It wasn't called Ross back then. It was called University of Michigan Business School.
Okay.
But I lived in the town. It was down the street from me. So it was a no-brainer to go and do my MBA, while I was still working. But when I was finishing my MBA, it was the height of the dot-com boom, right? I mean, it was the late 90s. I graduated in 2000. And I had decided that auto industry, I've done enough, right? It's been 12 years. It's time for me to go do something else. And I had job offers from startups in the Valley, right? Several startups. But I also had traditional companies. So I had Intel, I had offers at that time from Intel, HP, but Microsoft. And I was the only one recruited out of Michigan's graduating class, MBA class that year at Michigan.
Okay.
I'm from Michigan for Microsoft.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a story why I went to Microsoft. So these were all great offers, great companies, and also some of the startups were very good. Somewhere along the way, I said, look, I want to go back to becoming an entrepreneur at some point. So Microsoft sounded like the best place to go to. The other, on a more lighter note, was Intel and HP were more industrial companies in some sense.
Right.
So when I went for my interview at Intel at Mesa, Arizona, in the marketing team, they said, listen, you need to be at work by 8 o'clock. You have to clock in. If you're half an hour late, you have to explain to your manager why. I said, what kind of a company is this? I don't want to work in another industrial company. And Microsoft was a very fun, that the atmosphere was great. The people I had talked to at that time when I went to the interview process, I really enjoyed those conversations. So I said, okay, Microsoft sounds like a good place to go. And that's what took me to Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft for 8 years. Part of I have 4 different teams, 2 internal startups, right, in Redmond. One around storage, and I was part of that team. It started out with 5 people and it kind of grew from there. And then I had a hand at setting up the second startup internally, which was around high performance computing.
Okay.
And 2 of us kind of built the business plan, went through the Bill Gates review. It was pretty intense, got the funding, started building the team out. This was in 2004. 2005, I had to return back to India for personal reasons. And so I came back. I came back to a very different role. After 19 years in the US, we packed up and moved to India in 6 weeks. Sold our house, did everything. Kids were small, but we said, okay, it's time for us to move back. And I came back as the chief of staff to the chairman of Microsoft India, Mr. Ravi Venkatesh.
Okay.
So I was Ravi's chief of staff for 3 years. And a completely different role. I'm a product person by background, product technology person. This role was India, if in 2005, if you remember, Incredible India was the slogan, right? And everybody wanted to have a piece of the action. And with a company like Microsoft, it was a dream job because and working with somebody like Ravi was a fantastic experience, right? It gave me a ringside, not even ringside, ring in the ring view of what was happening in India. Because Microsoft being a company that spanned everything, it gave us a chance for me to look at it from the consumer lens, from the enterprise lens, from the small and medium business lens. And we were building a strategy for Microsoft in India at that time. And we had an ambitious plan to grow revenue 10x in 3 years. Ravi was very ambitious. He had just joined and he had been brought in by the leadership to reset or kind of grow Microsoft's ambition in India. And so it gave me a chance to work on these very interesting projects, looking at India from various lenses. And it also taught me a lot, right, in terms of thinking strategically, thinking about, big ambitions, and also my role as the chief of staff was to align a lot of the business units that Microsoft had in India under, they didn't all report into the same structure, but how do you tie them together? What we call a GCC now, right?
Correct.
So at that time, it wasn't that. It was just some, various businesses of Microsoft in India. How do we kind of put a structure around it, bring it together with some notional alignment that we could all think about, collectively, right? So we did some very interesting things around that. And anyway, so that was 3 years of in India, 5 years in the US with Microsoft. But it's a great company. I mean, I learned a huge amount, and you can see why they still survived, right? After all these years,
Right.
It's almost 50 years old now. But and some of the people there were like, fantastic people to learn from. So great experience. But 3 years in, and Ravi and I had agreed that a chief of staff role can only be, a finite amount of time because I had to get back to what I did, what my core was, which was building products. But at that time, I was in Bangalore. I had moved here. And Microsoft didn't have a technology presence in India, in Bangalore at the time. And across the street from Microsoft office here in Embassy Golf Links was Yahoo.
Okay.
And I got a chance then to work with another extremely, talented and very ambitious person called Sharad Sharma, who then went on now, of course, known more for Iceberg.
Yeah.
But he used to manage Yahoo's development center in India at the time. He's a good friend. So he said, listen, you know what? Why don't you come over? And help me set up product management as a function in the India center. Because it didn't exist in those days. And at Microsoft, I had done product management. So I went over to Yahoo. I eventually landed up running a large chunk of Yahoo globally as a product management leader. I ran global search, what we call commerce properties, which is shopping, travel, and all that. And then also emerging markets, which is Southeast Asia, India, Middle East. We had acquired a company in Middle East to enter that market, and Latin America. And that was a fairly large, ambit, if you can imagine, right? Global search itself was a large business at that time. And we were, of course, competing with Google, and, it was a tough fight, right? Yahoo was trying to hold on to market share, it had its own dynamics. And then emerging markets was very interesting because it was not about revenue in those days. It was really about engaging 800 million potential users in these markets. And again, I was based here in India, based in Bangalore, had a global remit. And I did that for about close to little less than 5 years, but fantastic learning. But it kind of killed me because I was on a plane most of the time, traveling somewhere. And even if I was in town, it was in those days, there was no video conference or anything, right? You were on a phone call most of the time. So I would land in Bangalore, airport at 2:30 in the morning, get off. There was a joke that seat 7K was booked for me on the Emirates flight. I would get off at the airport at 2:30, get on conference calls, driving home. Great learning, but at a physical level and at a personal level, it took a toll, right? So I said, look, okay, it's time to slow down, because it was starting to affect a lot of other things. So I at that time, Yahoo was going through a lot of changes, as you can imagine. And an opportunity came up to head eBay's development center in India, which was and I had a dual role. So I was a local head for the center, as well as I had a global platform. I was managing their monetization platforms, their billing systems, pricing systems, and all that. And again, great company. I mean, eBay, was synonymous with, marketplaces at that time. Of course, we competed with Amazon, and India was, starting to get hot. Flipkart had been created, and a bunch of other e-commerce companies starting up in India, gaining a lot of money. There was a lot of money pouring into India. Amazon at that that time invested $1 billion. But we were, but eBay was we were holding our own. We were operating in the market at that time. I didn't run the business. I ran the development center. And it was a great experience. We grew the center. We had some fantastic work going on here. But then eBay exited India. If you remember, in end of 2016, they exited the business and they decided to exit the development center. So that's one of those places one of those times when people talk about GCCs as an infinite growth. I had the both the good fortune of setting it up and the ill fortune of shutting it down. The good news was we placed everybody. All the employees, pretty much found jobs, and e-commerce was a hot commodity in those days. But again, very, so been through that, the cycle of that. And then post eBay, actually, I took a year and a half off. I took a sabbatical.
Okay.
And by that time, I'd been working for almost 2.5 decades. And I said, okay, it's time for me to take a break, because it'd been a treadmill, right? I'd never taken a break until then in my career. And I actually ended up doing some interesting work. I was working with a large Indian enterprise that was getting into the EV game.
Okay.
And they wanted somebody to come in and work with them on helping put together a digital platform around the EV. And so I got to work on that. I started doing some consulting with, helping a bunch of startups. I was really enjoying myself. My wife didn't like it, that that I didn't have a full-time job. I was doing this, variety of things, but I was enjoying it, right? And then I get a cold call from somebody who became my hiring manager at VMware.
Okay.
It was literally a very interesting call. He calls me up and he says, it was the day after Diwali in 2017. And he says, I heard, I didn't know him. He's a good friend now, but I didn't know him at the time. He says, I heard you're not doing anything. So I said, that's an interesting opening call. What do you mean? So he said, no, I heard from somebody that you're just kind of pottering around, not doing much. Would you be interested in coming and helping us at VMware? So I said, okay. I mean, I knew VMware from the old days, from my Microsoft days and the enterprise days, but I had lost sight of the company. So I said, okay, how big is it? What do you guys do in India, etc.? So they said, oh, we have 2,500 people. I said, I'm in Bangalore for the last X number of years. I've never heard of VMware anywhere, right? And I was relatively active in the ecosystem, and I'll get to that in a second. So he said, yeah, that's our problem. Is we want somebody to come in and help us re-establish ourselves in this market, grow the center, etc. So I said, okay, sounds interesting. Let me have a conversation. And it was a long courtship. It was one of those things that neither I was in a hurry nor they were in too much of a hurry. So we kept talking, and then after a few months, I said, okay, is it going anywhere, or are we just having a nice conversation? So they said, no, we are very keen, right? We just wanted for you to meet as many people as you can across the company. And VMware is a great company. I mean, when I started with them, we had about close to 2,500 people in India. And the CEO at that time, Pat Gelsinger, his overall advice to me was, he said, listen, we need to, I'm thinking of growing the employee base 5x in India. And more importantly, we wanted to make it a strategic center. We need you to connect it better into the company. And that's, that was the kind of the job description, if you may, right?
As brief as it could be.
Yeah, I actually love those things because I actually, as a person, I love ambiguity. Okay, the more ambiguous the scenario, gives me the latitude to put structure around it.
Okay.
So if somebody gives me a cookie cutter, here's what I need you to do, I'm a little less, excited about doing those things. I love ambiguity. So this was you can't get more ambiguous than saying, okay, I'm going to grow 5x, and more importantly, connected to the company, build leadership. Those are the three things he told me. So I said, okay, sounds interesting. Let's take it up, right? So I started with them, and of course, COVID hit in 2020. And so we grew 5x during COVID. When Broadcom acquired VMware, India was about 10,500 employees. And more importantly, we had built a lot of global leadership here, right? We had people here who were running, fairly large chunks of Yahoo's infrastructure, VMware's infrastructure work products from here in various domains. And we had built a cadre of middle management that was actually world class, right? I mean, I would really, you know, so that was, so it kind of achieved some of the objectives that we started off. And then Broadcom came in and acquired VMware. And then I was, as many of the senior leaders left, including me. At that time, FIS happened. So again, you will see one thread in my career is I've never really actually looked for a job.
Okay.
Somehow, good karma, I don't know what you want to call it. I've always had people kind of come to me and say and offer me things. Okay. Same thing happened with FIS. I had an exec recruiter who reached out to me and he said, we are hiring for FIS. So I said, I don't know anything about FIS. So I live in Whitefield. I don't live far from here. I had seen the board driving by here. I've seen the board.
Okay.
FIS. So I said, I think I've seen the office. What do they do? They said, oh, they're in banking and financial services. So I said, I don't know anything about banking and financial services. Other than as a consumer, I go to a bank or use my banking software. I don't know anything about it. So they said, no, that's not what they want. They really want, it's a large GCC for them in India. So they want somebody to come in. The traditional old model, how do you modernize it and bring it into the new era is really what they want. So the fact that you don't know anything about banking and financial services may actually be an advantage because you don't get caught up in the day-to-day of what they do. So I said, okay, let me have the conversation. So anyway, long story short, I had an offer from FIS and it was an interesting project. The way I think about this, Saurabh, is there are three kind of use cases in GCCs. There is the new setup GCC, right? 0 to 500,000, whatever it is. There is the scaling GCC, which is the one I had done at VMware. So I had done the eBay one, which was, roughly 100. When I joined them, they were in Chennai. I moved reset it up in Bangalore, grew it to about 500 people. That was one journey. I had done that. I had done the 2,500 to 10,000 journey. But at FIS, it was double that size, built for a different, older model of a delivery center, very much cost focused. And then now this was transforming a GCC, which was at scale. How do you move a GCC at that scale from one model to another model? So it gave me a third use case to work on, right? So being a product guy, you hand a product guy a GCC, it becomes a product. So that's why I look at it.
Right.
So it's a product, right? And so that's the journey we have been on for the last 2 years almost. January, I complete 2 years at FIS. And when I came in, I have my own framework of how I think about evaluate GCCs. And so I applied the lens here. And there were some really good things. So I asked I have very senior leaders here who were, so I said, my first thing I did was I told them, you give me a SWOT analysis from your lens. Some of them have been here for a couple of decades. So I said, you do that. So this is the inside out view of what we think is our advantage. Then I brought in an external consulting firm to come and do the outside in view.
Okay.
And we tallied it up. 60% overlap, but 40% different, right? Sometimes you overjudge sometimes you're overcritical too. It's the other problem. So I said, look, let's be balanced. We'll take both and we'll evaluate and see where we are at. And it highlighted a few things and then we said we have actioned it over the last year and a half or so. So we're starting on that, we are still, I would say we are probably 30-40% of the way there in terms of that transformation process. But what was interesting is the company itself is transforming. See, FIS, we're a $10 billion fintech, 50 years old, but very, very deeply embedded in the money life cycle, as we call it. And the way we think about this is the money at rest, which is your core banking and all of those kinds of things. Money in motion, which is the payment systems. And then money at work, which is the capital markets piece that we have. So we cover the entire money life cycle. 10% of global GDP flows through an FIS system somewhere in the world.
Oh, okay.
I mean, to put that in, to frame that in the scale at which we operate. We are the largest debit issuer in the world. We are in the process of acquiring TSYS from Global Payments.
Okay.
TSYS is the largest credit issuer in the world. Today, we have roughly about 10 million credit cards under management that we issue and manage. TSYS brings in 1 billion cards. So we become the largest credit issuer in the world as well. But more than that, our payment systems, underpinnings, right, whether our switches, the IST international, including NPCI uses a code drop from us as their switch because it's a national asset. We don't. It's not an FI. They've taken the code and they manage it. But many of the global banks, including Indian banks, they use our payment switches on the back end. So we are very well embedded. And then on the capital market side, we are, it's a fantastic set of customers that we cater to through our trade processing and so on and so forth. So we are very deeply embedded. So, I didn't have any understanding of all this until I came here. And then when we look at that advantage, and then you look at India, there's a huge amount of that work across our technology teams, across our professional services teams, across our customer experience teams that are run out of here. So when I looked at that cycle, there is no other place in the company where I can have a staff meeting where I can walk through the entire customer journey left to right. So we said, okay, how do we turn that into an advantage for us? For the company, it's not just about India, right? India is only a location for us. But if you have that type of a concentration of work, how do we start to take that and start to amplify it for the larger companies? And that's the second phase of our transformation that we are on right now. And it's a very exciting future for us as we look ahead.
I think that's the beauty of being a product guy. Your journey from automotive till fintech, it involves so many, different kind of.
That's what keeps life interesting.
Yeah, sure. And I think you still, and you talked about doing like entrepreneurship at Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think you still love it.
I still love it
because I see that you are you're charter member of TIE. And you're also on NASSCOM's GCC Council. So you have and you talked about ringside.
Actually, I've been very active. I told you that I've been active in the ecosystem.
Right.
And I have to thank Sharad for this.
Okay.
He, at that time, he had just set up product council at NASSCOM. He used to be on the NASSCOM.
I know. Yeah.
This is 2008. So Sharad said, listen, you know what? You come and help set up product management for Yahoo in India. And we built a fantastic cadre of product management and UX out of India at that time. Starting from scratch. We had few product managers, but we really kind of grew that cadre very much. What happened was, and the other thing he told me was, we need to do this for India. Don't just do this for Yahoo. Okay. Sharad always had this very much of a, ecosystem bias. He said, not only should we set it up for Yahoo, but how do we then amplify it, make India a product nation? That was really the, today again, people are talking about this. But this is 2008, right. And he had the vision to talk about that in those days. So I started getting involved in NASSCOM and right from those days and evangelizing product management. So I used to go to business schools, Indian business schools here, whether IIM Bangalore, IIMs, other IIMs. And I would go talk to MBA students. And then in those days, you ask them, how many of you want to become product managers? About half the room will raise their hands, right? You ask them, how many of you want to be tech product managers? Or everybody's hand will come down because they all had ambitions to join product management in FMCG. They wanted to join Hindustan Lever or Procter & Gamble. And product management really, I don't know if you know the history of product management. Product management originally started off in FMCG.
Okay.
As a function. Eventually it made the leap into technology and other areas. So that was the journey, right? And then so I kind of recruited a bunch of people in the journey, in the ecosystem. And we started evangelizing product management. One of my product managers at Yahoo, he set up something in the first days of something called India Product Management Association in 2009. And Yahoo sponsored it at that time. So that's a journey we've been on. I got a chance to serve on the NASSCOM EC as well while I was at VMware. I was elected member 3 terms of the EC. And I was chairing the product council which we then converted to the deep tech council of NASSCOM at that time. So I've had a ground level view of what is happening in the ecosystem, engaging with startups, engaging with founders of various sorts. And I really enjoy doing that. I continue to do that. That's a part of me that, I really still enjoy. I'm still very active we have 27 WhatsApp groups around technology.
Okay.
It's just set up during the time with NP. Of course, 1 or 2 are more active than others. But this is a gathering of who's who in the Indian ecosystem, not just from India, but people who are Indian diaspora. They all participate in these groups. They're very, very active.
Okay.
Right? Talking about various things. Now, of course, with AI, we have a lot of discussions around that about overall in terms of what's happening. So, to me, I think I've always had this dual interest of what we do in corporate, what we do in the ecosystem, and how do we bring it together. And that's what keeps life interesting.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, having, a ringside view of both the startup ecosystem through time as do you think there are untapped synergies, especially in the fintech space?
Yeah.
And like you talked about, Sharad, and, we have been developing the India stack for a long time.
Correct.
So do you think we still have untapped synergies which can really, though we are a front runner in terms of, financial products, honestly, in the world?
Correct. I believe so. I think, it's not just in fintech. If you look at the interplay, right, between, that's why deep tech becomes very interesting because an application across domains, whether it is in the pure digital domain, whether it is in the physical digital domain and in the fintech space, right? So if I look at it as a set of activities that we can do around these, I think there's, of course, India, sometimes when you travel is when you realize how far ahead India is in terms of the fintech, some of the evolutions that have happened here. Things like the UPI stack, right? I mean, when I was recently in the US for personal reasons for several weeks, and you realize how much you miss, pulling out your phone and making a quick, micro transaction. Now with Zelle and things like that, US is, trying P2P payments and all. But we are so far advanced in terms of what it is. I mean, not just there, but in terms of bringing financial inclusion down the socio-economic pyramid. I think we have done a fantastic job in India over the last decade or more. Started with the Jam stack and everything else that follows with it. And I think there's learning that is cross-border. So it's not just about India at that point. Is there a leap from here to there? So one of the things we did earlier this year, we launched an industry engagement platform out of FIS called FinExchange.
Okay.
And the idea behind that is, can we curate a learning platform for people to come together and discuss on these kinds of topics, right? And the first event we had in March, it was the first time, it was actually put together by our employees. And the idea was, these are people who, this is not a marketing team or anything. These are people who do a day job as something else, right? They're engineers and stuff. They came together and they put this platform together. We had very good resonance. We invited people from the startup industry, from, various other groups. The intent is that we'll keep it running. So we just, as a continuation of that FinExchange brand, we just did another event called a set of masterclasses. So the idea is, can we engage the fintech ecosystem from at an India level? This is not about selling, right? This is about learning. And can we bring that forward? So to your point about how do you discover those untapped things, we can't sit in a room and discover this.
Of course. Yeah.
We've got to create these engagement platforms, right? And be able to do that. So I believe there's opportunity because, see, the world is never static. There's always new things coming up. There's always new ways of looking at things. So, and for a company like ours, with a global footprint, it becomes very interesting to cross-pollinate. Can we learn from some of the work happening here? See, as the UPI stack goes global, as you know, in France, they are trying to implement similar things, etc. Because we operate in those markets too. So it's not going to be very long before those customers in those markets come to us and say, hey, what do you know? So can we be ready for it? Right. I think those are the kinds of things that we are thinking ahead of the curve. And to me, I think that is where, I don't think about India as just this isolated, FIS India, right? We are a part of the company. And there are things that we can bring to the rest of the company, which the company can't, will not even be able to do, even if they wanted to. How can we do that? And then we do the other way, right? What is the company, what are things that are happening in other markets that we can bring back and learnings and, cross-pollinate. And I think that's the advantage of having these large GCCs. Right. And then, of course, we have many of our global customers are based here.
Right.
Large centers here as well. And how do we engage with them more and doing these things? So those are the things that we are.
And, talking about this GCCs, that large GCCs are here.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a leader a few days back. And he said that, it's all about intellectual arbitrage now. So of all the arbitrages that we have talked about, it's about intellectual arbitrage that India provides. What do you think?
I believe so. Because with AI coming, see, look, the thing with AI, it's we are just scratching the surface, right? When we think about the impact of AI as it plays out over the next 5-10 years, it is intellectual arbitrage. how much can you make these systems learn? How do you actually take these systems which are getting more and more intelligent by the day, in ability to do certain things? How do you bring it to a larger remit? And so the learnings then become very critical. How do you apply those learnings? The human element that needs to come in, which is, it's not just about, getting some work done. It's not a task-based view. It's a workflow-based view. And if you look at our advantage of some of these large centers that we all have, right? Like I mentioned to you before, this is the only place where I can, in my weekly staff meeting, I can go around the customer journey. How do we take that into an advantage? And that's happening across all of this. It's not just us, right? If we go to any of the large, centers, this is the only place where we have the front office, the back office, and the middle office all in one place. How do you turn that into an advantage in an intelligence era? When we think about AI, the way AI will have its biggest impact is on the workflow. If you don't know what the workflow is, how do you influence it? And these are the places where we can actually make that influence happen. So I think, to me, that's where that would be my interpretation of intellectual arbitrage within the organization, is that in other parts of the organization, they only have their view of the work that they do. Here are places where we can actually build the cross view, the customer journey view, and be able to then turn it into an advantage for the rest of the organization.
And do you think in this still there are some capabilities in India which we are under leveraging, which are not fully utilized, and which can give us probably better?
I think I think there are, but I think there's also some challenges that we have to overcome.
Okay.
If I look at the, for lack of a better term, the GCC ecosystem, if we look back over the last 20 years, at least the view I have is the last 20 years, it started off as a cost play, right? It was about moving back office operations to India and taking advantage of the cost. Then we moved into this thing of saying, look, it's not just cost anymore. How, companies were digitizing very rapidly. Organizations, which are non-digital companies, organizing. You couldn't attract, or find pools of technology talent anywhere else in the world. So the cost equation, pure cost equation, kind of moved towards pools of technologist equations, taking still advantage of the cost, but really kind of going after talent base. We did that. I think we have reached that. That was one of the phase of growth that happened over a decade. But with AI coming in, those two equations are at play, right? If AI truly, over the next 5 to 10 years, takes over a lot of the functions that humans do today, a lot of the, coding functions or back office functions and so on and so forth. What is the role of a GCC anymore? Is our GCC's role, it's not a cost equation, why India then? If it's not a talent pool equation, why India then? What is India's advantage? I think, to me, the next phase of evolution for all of us is tapping into that customer workflow journey understanding. But do we really understand it well enough? When we look at it as a leadership, even from this location, do our employees who work on these different parts, who's stringing it together into a view and a viewpoint that can then be used to leverage in training models, training these agents, building the new workflows and so on and so forth for our customers. I think that, to me, will become the next phase of advantage for us as an organization. So if you ask me what is the India advantage in that remit, I think it'll be that. It'll be that. But we have to make use of it, right? I mean, it is a perishable commodity over time. Because if you start removing those workflows out of these centers over time, but you do it piecemeal, then you lose some of that knowledge that exists there. We have to be able to bring it together to actually turn it into the next phase of this. And that, to me, will be where the AI COEs will get built for many companies. It will be in India, but we have to take advantage of that, right? We have to very rapidly reskill our employee base, reskill our young people who are emerging from college to take advantage of the AI advantage window that we have in front of us. And I think that, to me, is an industry and it's an ecosystem that needs to come together to make this happen. It cannot be done company by company.
And you also have a view that, we need to look at not only the intent, but the outcome of AI adoption,
Absolutely.
if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything has to be outcome driven.
Right.
It cannot be task based. Right? It's not just about, doing some work. See, I think the notion of delivery that used to exist in the in the kind of the IT services construct, which has the connotation that I'm given a task and I'll do the work. That is going to change. People have to start understanding what, why, and the how. Okay, those three need to be strung together. If you only do the how and not worry about what and why, then you're not learning the entire piece. So we have to reframe, reskill our people to start thinking about what is it that they're doing, why are they doing it, what is the outcomes that will come out by doing it. I think that viewpoint needs to be brought forward.
And staying with AI for a little bit longer, in fintech, the using of AI but responsibly.
Correct. It's huge part.
Huge part. So how are you navigating that?
So I think we have a lot of controls in place. We are a regulated industry, even though we are not a bank, but we are regulated because we service the banks and we actually host for them, etc., etc. So responsible AI, right from the beginning of this whole Gen AI thing that has come up, we as a company have an AI council, which is the senior most members of the company. So there has been initially there were strong controls in place. As we are learning more, we are bringing the barriers down to adopt. But at the same time, we are putting in a lot more scrutiny on outcomes that are being driven through AI, so that we are keeping in mind that biases don't creep in, the hallucinations that will affect things don't creep in. Because at the end of the day, we manage the money life cycle. And if you're managing the money life cycle, it's a huge responsibility on us. And so responsible AI. So, that's something that's an ongoing thing. It's not something that you'll solve overnight. But our aperture opening on AI has been relatively, conservative, right? I won't say we're not doing it, but we are doing it with the right focus and the right controls in place and the right risk view, so that we just don't open it up and let, things creep in, which we don't want to happen. But it's an ongoing discussion internally on responsible AI opening.
Yeah, for industry, for space like fintech, it becomes all the more.
Absolutely, very much.
Because it's all about trust, and once that gets broken,
correct.
I guess that's the end of any.
Correct. But having said that, our customer discussions are all centered around this. I think there are some things that everybody is starting to think about. Data, for example, right? There's a lot of data. Obviously, all fintechs, they collect a lot of data, not just us, but our customers themselves. That management of that data is very critical. Making it usable, right? In order for you to train your models, build the next phase of products, etc., utilizing AI, the data has to be cleaned up and brought into a much more consistent way. So that's a big area of focus for us, where we are looking at data. We are starting to build then, solutions on top of it. We have launched a few. We launched one called Treasury GPT, which is for our treasury management suite. How do we help our customers manage their, treasury much better, bringing that viewpoint to it. We have something called Agent Edge, which is for the banking industry. Think about it as your customer walks into a bank branch. They want to open a new account. Instead of sitting and filling out all the forms,
right,
there's an agent who works with them, right? It's actually recording the conversation that some two people are sitting like we are, and you're telling me you want to open an account. I ask you the questions, you respond. We have a solution that's listening to this, filling out the forms in real time. Of course, with the left, it'll enable the bank, the person, whoever is taking the information, to verify it and all that. But it eases the way in which the information gets collected, right? How you collect the KYC, how do you, all that other stuff. So how do we improve the workflow for our customers is a key part to that. Internally, we are starting to look at how do we improve our own workflows, our own efficiencies. So coding, our engineering teams are starting to use Copilot a lot more in terms of their engineering work, with appropriate controls around it, right? So we have to be careful in terms of what's the kind of code getting generated for the same reasons we're talking about. And so on, right? So we are looking at it from an internal efficiency as well as from our customer viewpoint, and then bringing it all together into, a framework that we can then take forward.
I heard a very interesting thing yesterday, that a company who's started using Copilot, but they have disabled copy and paste.
Okay.
Yeah, because then what happens is that you code.
You get sent to your production code. Absolutely. See, I think I was in a forum the other day, and somebody on the panel was making this comment. He said, look, the 3-week sprint is still the 3-week sprint. It's just that the coding is faster, but the testing takes much longer.
Correct.
Because a lot of times you're looking at this code and you don't know what it generated, right? So that's why I think some of this thing of experienced developers are able to use this better than a novice developer, because a novice developer is just cutting and pasting. So that is probably why they have disabled it.
Sure.
Because they don't know what got generated.
Right.
And debugging it takes longer because you didn't create the code yourself.
Correct.
But these things will improve over time.
All right. Ram, final question. In your view, if India is to build, and of course we are, a fintech platform that is for the world, what would that look like?
I don't know if there's one product, I would imagine.
Okay.
I think what we have learned on social inclusion, right? I think I don't think we should minimize that.
Right.
I think we have learned a lot in that journey. And there are so many parts of the world where financial inclusion is still struggling.
Correct.
Including some of the more advanced countries, right? I think there is one thing that we can bring to the world, the learnings that we have. And I know we are starting to do that a little bit. It is that, how do you bring the world into the financial ecosystem, in the right way, with the right, controls and risk profiles around it, and then make it mass market. I think that's an area which I think, India has achieved at scale at which we operate. Nobody else has been able to do it. And I think that to me is a big learning that can be brought forward. Other than that, and then financial inclusion in many other ways, right? I think we have our NBFCs, some of them doing some good work in the non-top metro areas. Again, to this point about financial inclusion. I think those are the kinds of things that property scale, the scale at which we operate, and there is, as people say, there is scale and there's India scale. And if you can operate India scale on a global level, I think there's some really good learnings that we can bring to the table.
Right. Thank you, Ram, so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
I enjoyed the conversation as well, Saurabh. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Ram.